Please give it up for Mr. Kevin Lyman.
Hi, good to see you. Can't see out there. It's like a classroom. I teach over at USC, 5 classes, so it's about the size of my class. So.
Yeah, you'll be able to hear him once in a while.
All right, good.
And great to be here. Obviously, we're all stoked for what's coming this year with Warped Tour, the resurgence. Now, the second year of it really roaring back. I went to the first year of the last year with the Long Beach stop, and walking around, it was just like incredible. And I wanted to kind of get a sense from you as somebody who is so hands-on with an amazing talent for booking bands, but like putting this show together since the beginning. What was it like walking around and seeing it revived the way it was last year?
Well, actually, I was really nervous, to be honest. I don't show that a lot, but I had like one chance. We had one chance to get it right because, we'd been around the country 25 times around the country, and all of a sudden we're doing these weekend shows. There's bigger stages, there's video, there's lights, but you had to make sure that it felt like Warped Tour between the stages. It was so important to me that when people came in, that they were going to get this feeling of kind of an adventure in a way. And last week I was up in Toronto talking, and I go, it just had to feel like that kind of like story, like you made your own story, because everyone has their own pathway through Warp.
Yeah, I got lost a few times. I'll be honest with you, it was pretty huge. So my pathway was pretty all over the place. I wish I had your hat. I would have been able to figure it out like Indiana Jones, But to me, what was great about it is getting lost in a festival, which is like something that we don't get to do enough.
And that's what, Warped was always kind of like. I always said everyone made their own story. You might have had 2, 3 friends that you did that story together, but it was from the minute you had to figure out how to bring the canned food together, because you didn't want to be the friend that did not bring the canned food for the donation. Yeah, and you'd be left at the back of the line. Yeah. Or then and then with the way, rolling out the lineups, and it was pretty exciting last year. Steve Van Doren, we always had the balloon, and then he made this massive one. Like everything had to get bigger. Or it would have been Spinal Tap with our little balloon, and just to see the fans, come in, and doors were supposed to be at 11 o'clock, and I have new partners with Insomniac. They're up doing EDC, a lot of them right now, and they're fabulous partners, and I'm like, you guys got to be ready. Like, people are going to be here early. They're going to be here early, and their executive guys, D-Cam and Pasquale. I think Pasquale kind of got it, but the other guy's like, no way. No one comes early to a festival. I go, be ready. And in Long Beach, when we had 40,000 people in by 11 o'clock in the morning, and they all ran right to the balloon, and they were waiting. And just the roar that went up when the balloon went up.
The lineup dropped.
It made the work, all that work, kind of special. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, it was super fun. And I think, for me, what the question I had in the beginning was you partnering with Insomniac, and it being, because you said it's a different, EDM people are our nighttime crowd. Totally. You know what I mean? They're not used to people crashing the gates or showing up at 11 a.m.
Oh, yeah. It's got, I think they're production people. So there were some morning people that working on Warped Tour and got to go to bed at a reasonable hour. And then they have their night owls are working up in Las Vegas right now. And but it was the same type of thing. And when I brought it back, there was a lot of people approaching to bring it back through the years. And I just wasn't comfortable with it. I thought I'd done everything with the project. And a woman named Maureen Volker, who worked on Warped Tour, she started out in the catering line, was their director of partnerships now. And I think they hit me on the right day. I said, yeah, I'd love to come up. I have a lot of respect for Pasquale, and we sat down, and he started telling me about how he learned a lot from Warped Tour, how to build his community. And it literally took us about 10 minutes to say, it was like a 10-minute talk. I go, just felt right. And I'm like, let's go. And literally, like, within a week, it was just like, pedal to the metal, and I think they even felt a little weird, like, wow, this guy just gets into it. And I drove down and called Steve. I think I called Steve when I was driving, Steve Van Doren, and I said, hey, man, I got a chance to bring this back. And he's like, all in, too. And he was like, okay. And I said, I'll come down and talk to you guys about it next week. And by then, we started having calls. Amanda, who is my booker, we're having calls with all the agencies saying we're coming back, and it was full on last year.
What I loved about it was, even though it was like this new incarnation, it still felt like it had the core of what was always important to you, which when we talked about it for the book, Tearing Down the Orange Curtain, which is no, just kidding.
Available at Romans.
One of the things we talked about was your kind of motto, which was to honor the past, like look towards the future and not really judge what was going on right now. And I think that was a great thing that I walked around and saw so many like OG classic bands that were there in the early days of the Warped Tour, and then a bunch of bands I had no idea about. So why is that still important to you today?
Well, there's a lot of amazing festivals out there. They're all over the country. And when I came back, Warp was always about artist development, true artist development. And I was like thinking, well, we used to get a band. Everyone was happy to give me the band for 2 months. It's here, Kevin, take them and run them around the country. And we'd play for 500,000 to 600,000 people, and all the partnerships we had with Fuse Television, AP, all these things. That I was like, how are we going to do it? But that's being a professor at USC. I teach 5 classes. So I use them. They don't realize they're my focus group a lot of times. My students get it. They're on the inside of everything. They were witness to me putting this back together. And no NDA. They just were told, like, you're going to learn a lot here. But I kept asking people, and I've been asking for years, how many lines do you look down on a festival poster before you decide if it's a good festival? And people, it was like 3, and then it's been shrinking to 2. And I'm like, well, how are we going to develop these new acts like we used to on Warped? So when I came back in and I said, okay, we're going to advertise this way where we do the videos, we gave each band their moment to create those videos. In the first year, literally the videos were coming in while we were posting them. Like it was a little bit of a, but gave those bands a chance. And then we started to see the reaction, that they were getting 100, 200,000 views. And those young bands, that's the whole goal of Warped, is like, it was about taking a band like Haley William Paramore and bringing them 3 years on Warped before they all of a sudden became a household name or a day to remember, or many of these acts. It takes time. So that's why this year you're starting to see some of those same acts that we're moving around on the stages, bringing them to other cities. And then there's a lot of amazing young bands. You'll see Senses here in a little bit. I'm totally into it right now on what they're doing. And then, some of those bands that maybe didn't get to play Warped, they got big radio hits and stuff right before Warped came out. Hoobastank's going to be with us this summer. They're going to be
yes. Give it up for Hoobastank.
And then you got Sammy Adams tonight, who's just got the spirit. Like, he's got that Warped spirit, But he just told me he came out of the studio with John Feldman, so you're always a little hyped after that.
I'm seeing some jazz drumsticks behind me, so maybe it's going to be Hint-a-Stank tonight.
I hope
Not
yeah.
But it's cool that you brought those 3 bands with you that all kind of represent what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's really a great time for our music, because I kind of grew up. I worked in the clubs of L.A. 320 nights a year. I was working for stage manager Lollapalooza. I was around that, and a lot of that stuff. And it's so nice for me to see, because sometimes we got a lot of crap for, like, there's not enough female bands or this or that. Well, sometimes there just wasn't that many female bands, or you asked them to play. And touring on Warped Tour is hard, but like when you can't take showers for a week and stuff, some bands were just like, I can't do this,
That's the next level bonding.
Yeah,
right
that was definitely an experience. I mean, especially when we'd go to Australia and we'd sleep in tents. That tour was a little crazy. But to see so many super strong female artists right now within the scene of music, it's just fabulous. Winona Fighter, you got Lolo, Honey Revenge, Chase Petra, you'd get on and on. There's so many awesome females in the scene of music. And also, when I growing up and working in L.A., there was no black artists playing punk rock. We had Fishbone,
Right, yeah.
Fishbone. And on the East Coast, you had Bad Brains. But it was not a scene that was very diverse. And now you got bands that are taking over, Paradox, Magnolia Park, the Nova Twins. So to see this scene of music kind of collaborating and becoming so accepting has been really exciting, coming back and being part of this. And then, when it was, and the cool thing about Insomniac, there's like no pressure on me to like, oh, we need to do that. They said, what do you want to do? And I was thinking in the back of my mind, our 2 closest countries are Mexico and Canada. And, whatever, we're not getting into politics of that, but dividing us the way it has and building up borders. But Warped was always a place to bring people together, and this music's always brought people together. So to have the opportunity to bring the show to Mexico City and then also go back to Montreal has been really cool, and booking Division Minuscule and Allison and Deluxe and some of those bands from Mexico to come up here and play, and then opening up that chance to go up. I just got Toronto. I just had love Canada, and we just had a great week up there with all the crew from Canada, and it's just going to be fun. But the music could bring us together. It always has been a unifying thing, and this scene has always, if we can unify it and grow it together. And the cool thing was, it wasn't just a nostalgia tour. It was you do your research, and the average age was about 27 last year. And this year we're seeing, if you just take credit card sales, 2 new credit cards for every one that was used last year. So
damn, that's some math right there.
So
that's like back level promoter stuff, right?
Well,
there.
There's all this me in the back of my mind kind of going. So I'm thinking that potentially we're turning on a new generation to these bands, and it was a great space to be in. It was a community.
Totally. Well, I feel that too. Again, just talking about some of the bands that you've had that continuously play, like Pennywise or, Aquabats or, bands like that have such a long history, but you walk in the crowd and you see kids with the T-shirts on, like, it's to them, it's just as fresh as ever. And I think that that's something great that is a reminder that, like, that spirit of music, it just keeps finding its new audience.
Well, and to bring this back, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, Warped was always the cheapest ticket for a festival. It was always the cheapest show. And to have these new partners, and I was doing all my math, that promoter stuff you have to do to be fiscally responsible, and I had come up with the ticket price, and I went in and met with them, and they said, I think we could do it for $10. I've never had a person, say, Kevin, I think we can do it for $10 cheaper. So when we came up with that $150 2-day festival ticket price, including fees, I thought that could recreate an entry point to festivals, because they have become so economically unattainable for people that maybe with this new ticket price, people would take a chance to come to a festival. And it was fun to see. And then that math again, we heard about a third of the people had never been to a festival or a concert maybe last year when they came to Warped Tour. So that was pretty cool.
Thanks for making sure that the young kids and journalists can afford to go to your live events. I appreciate that.
For journalists, I can't make it that cheap. I know what you get paid. I got to let you guys in free.
Please sneak in.
Well, that's what we did too, because Warped
Tour's
Tour's model, starting out for me, was if you had a library card and you had written a story for your school paper, you were the press to me, because Rolling Stone and Spin didn't really pay attention to Warped Tour. It came from the roots of what we were all doing, and that's where I made that first partnership with AP Magazine back in the day. And we've kind of reconnected with this, to be honest, and it was different this year. Last year, it was a transition year. We were all figuring out how to work together, and every festival has to be treated different. Every audience has to be worked with differently. And I said the press has to be done, and they had different ways they did some press. And this year, I'm like, no, we're going to go back to the old style. And, we want to embrace the podcast now. We didn't have podcasts in 90. We barely had the internet back then. And then we're going to make sure that everyone's accepted. And I know the first round of DC Press, we've given 84 press passes this year. And I think there was 3 last year. So this year, 84 press passes, because I want those young writers that you were inspired at one point, because I know those writers, from back in the day that got their first story at Warped Tour. Many of them tell me it's really hard to write something bad about you, Kevin, because you were actually nice to me first. And, so sometimes I'm glad to see this kind of re-embracing of the whole community, because it takes every piece of it. It's not just the bands. It's the people that work at the shows. It's the people that write about the shows. It's everyone that goes out and, it takes a whole world to make this work.
Totally. And one of the things that I like what you do as far as keeping the festival on people's minds and keeping that community spirit are the warm up events that you do. Like I said, I'm in Long Beach, and I saw the Holy Wars kill it out there in the middle of like a apartment complex thing. I'm like, some of these tenants are getting a show that they either really want or that they never counted on. And I think that's great. What is it like to kind of put together events that help bring the spirit?
My market, we didn't really have a marketing team last year. It was like we were winging it. We were just pulling together. And Janet and Garrett, our marketing people, we kind of embrace that community when we go into a city. And we're trying to say, like, a lot of times festivals have pre-shows where they sell tickets and do things. We're like, well, people are paying a lot to come to a festival. We know the economics are hard on people sometimes. So let's try to create these building activities that are free. I mean, so when we do something in Long Beach, the mayor down there, Rex, is pretty cool to us. He loves us and said, hey, we do this thing, and we put together the show. And Taryn, who's our operations person, and then we got a bunch of my students from USC were down there helping out. And it was fun to bring those bands, and so many people came up and said, oh, this is pretty cool. I didn't even know these bands. And when I brought Warp back, I also had to clear up a lot of things. They are a big company. There's a lot of paperwork, and I'm pretty free with my Warped Arrow. We had designed that Warped Arrow in '96, and that was my branding mark. And I'd give it to people if they wanted to put on a shirt, skateboard. There was actually a bar opened up in Orlando called Warped Pour, like Warped Pour. And it was a bunch of old crew people from Warped Tour opened a bar, and they dedicated plaques and posters and decorations from the tour, and they wrote me a letter and said, yeah, can we have the name? And I'm like, sure, this is awesome, Warped Tour. So, I got to go in and say, this is how Warped runs, and they have some cool lawyers over there. That's weird, cool lawyers. I don't think I've ever said that before.
Said the coolest lawyers,
and I said, we got to clear up. He goes, Kevin, how many people have you let just use this name? I go, I don't know, 50, 60, I don't know. We'll figure it out as they come forward. But those guys came forward. They figured it out. Of course, you got indemnity and all this stuff. So if something happens at that bar, they don't do it. But we let them kind of run with the ball and create a free event downtown last year in Orlando. And some of the bands that were playing Warped dropped by and did like a record release party. Then there's the official Warped band. There's unofficial and pseudo, they played tributes, and they came and played. And it was fun to walk through the crowd. I went down that night, and so many people just walked up and said, thank you. Wow, you didn't charge us to come to this. And that's what we've instilled is you give something back. And there was about 2,000 people on the streets. We had our canned food drive, nonprofits set up, and through the evening. And you don't have to monetize everything in this world. And I think I learned that in 1995. And we had a climbing wall.
I was just going to say, that was the first story that popped in my head when you said that.
We had this crazy climbing wall, and it was like a house. We had to push it all up. Everyone had bands where Sublime's out there pushing it up. The dog's pushing. We're all like trying to get this up every day. And the first day in 1995, I was sitting there in Salter Amphitheater, and a little guy comes running up with a mohawk. And he's like, dude, how much? And I was like, is that how we've got it? He's paid $15 to come to the Warped Tour, his hard-earned money. And he asked to climb the wall, how much? And I said, it's free. And the guy who brought the wall goes, dude, how am I going to get paid? I said, don't worry about it. We'll figure this out, which we sold a sponsorship the next year to help with the wall. But it was like, how do you give the fans something they don't really expect? Hence, the motorcycle, human cannonballs, wrestling, all the stuff. Because I always felt that everything was becoming too formulaic. You came, you watched an opening band, if you watched them, or you just came after, you got a little, and then you just go home. And everyone has the same experience. And I think under a big umbrella, you can have a different experience that actually makes the community stronger.
What made it stand out to me early on, was the combination of action sports and music. I think anyone that loves, loud music probably has appreciation for, maybe I'm speaking out of school here, people that like loud music probably like skateboarding, probably like BMX. I feel like that's sort of a soundtrack to that type of thing. And you just found a way to just bring it all together. And what was that like when you were really thinking about that back then, and how do you continuously sort of figure out ways to make that combination work?
Well, we were doing events around Southern California, and I was kind of had one foot in action sports and in the music scene, and I was doing a lot of events like the Swatch Impact Tour, which was a skateboarding tour, or the Vision Skate Escape. I had done a show at the Northridge cafeteria with the Chili Peppers on a Wednesday, and I said, hey, we got the skateboard contest down in Irvine. We'll pay you $250 to come down and play on top of the ramp. Chili Peppers, $250.
This was like sock era Chili Peppers.
And they did. And they were like, okay, we're there. And so we were blending action sports and music together. I was doing events like Board Aid with Trans World Publications. They had surfing and skateboarding. And I was doing production. So I was always out there, and then, boarding for breast cancer. We were very philanthropic with Golden Voice back then. We did the first Rock for Choice show, the Rock the Vote show. So we were kind of blending this kind of philosophy. And then literally, I was in the snow we were at the Grammy thing, and it was really weird. I was working with Selena, the artist Selena, at that point, and my wife reminded me that you were probably going to go out on the road with Selena, and I was kind of working with her as she was developing, and then 4 days earlier I did Board Aid, and I convinced Perry Farrell to do Mountain Song. Because I'd worked with James a lot, but he hadn't done it with his new band, and it was this giant board across, and I could picture there was like snowballs flying, people flying, bands, and I sat in the snow, and I had heard that the X Games were coming backstage. Someone said the X Games are going to be here, and it's going to be on television. And I said, all the stuff we do in Southern California lifestyle is actually going to start connecting the country together. So maybe I should go try to do something on my own. Or I'm pretty sure I'd probably be working for someone doing it. And, we did that. And there were so many crazy things that year happened. I couldn't afford name searches. And the name of the tour was actually going to be The Bomb.
Yep.
And,
exactly.
and that was the day we were going to announce it was the Oklahoma City bombing.
Perfect
So
time.
it wasn't a good time for a tour called The Bomb. But all that work you put in, there was Warp magazine, was run by Transworld. It was a lifestyle magazine. You could still buy it in Japan. And I called up Fran Richards and I said, man, I can't afford a name search. Can I borrow the name of your magazine? I won't put out a magazine if you don't put out a tour. So it became Warp Tour.
Even trade.
And then we got out the first year. I got home. I was broke as I was back working in the clubs the next day pretty much. And then, another crazy thing was the branding, how Vans got involved with Warped Tour.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm
going to slow you down real quick. You can hear about all this in great detail in the book, Tearing Down the Orange Curtain. We talk about this a lot. And one of the things that was really funny that totally caught me by surprise was that before you get into it was just the brand. It wasn't always going to be Vans. There was another brand that was completely crazy.
Yeah, I probably would not be teaching marketing and branding at USC if in 1996 it became known as the Calvin Klein Warped Tour. Yeah. My wife, who's a great artist, had drawn a skateboard. And I wish I had that. It'd be a great example. And it said Calvin Klein Warped Tour. And long story, they got stuck on a runway in a blizzard. I had a lawyer that could fuck up anything, and the one thing he helped me was fuck up that meeting with Calvin Klein 2 days later because I got this amazing meeting with Vans, they called, and it was really interesting. Walter Schoenfeld, I was in a room, and it went all kind of blurry because I walked out with a $300,000 sponsorship and a name to my tour, the Vans Warped Tour. It got me kind of out of debt, got us to the second year when I actually had bands like Pennywise and NoFX willing to come. And then a year later, Walter was like, hey, I know you sold the merchandise rights, which I tell everyone, do not sell your merchandise rights. I sold them to get on the road, and he gave me the money, $100,000 to go buy them back. And trust me, they were more than willing to take the money because they had no idea that we were going to sell our T-shirts for $10. Bands were going to sell them for whatever. We were going to do anything we wanted to do. So it's been an amazing relationship. I mean, I believe in people. Other people approached me, but Steve Van Doren and myself have been through the trenches. On the way out after that meeting, Walter Schoenfeld goes, and I need you to do some of these in Europe this summer. And I'm like, sure. Had no idea, and I ran to the post office to get a slip to figure out how to get a passport because there was no searching. I didn't have a passport. I'd never been to Europe, but all those years of working in the clubs of L.A., I knew some of the bands over there, and I was able to, and we went over there. We were cruising around Europe doing shows that in 1996, we did like 6 shows where we'd just show up in a plaza, we'd put up a skateboard ramp, bands would come play, police would show up. And we looked, we were pretty dirty and riding around, and we just say the guy in charge left in a Mercedes because they'd always think the guy in charge must drive a Mercedes. And we would pack up and move on to another country, and it was great, and we had a great run together for 24 years. And then I really, at the end of it, I just felt I had done everything I could with that project, and was very comfortable with walking away from it, not selling the name because someone would have messed it up. They couldn't. It's too hard to nurture that brand. Yeah. And went off and had the opportunity to transfer into what I've been doing. And then coming back the last 2 years have been a lot. And it's a lot of fun right now.
And you're getting your steps in, too, walking around. I see you. It's kind of fun because I think people that know you look for you out there just walking around and seeing stuff and just kind of being very approachable, like with fans and stuff. Like, what were some things that you heard out there on the field when you were, or on the, in the festival when you were coming out and that first or last year?
It was really nice because people would normally come up and say, "So happy to be back. My first show was 1996, or something, or 97, or hey, that was really cool. You inspired me to do this." A lot of people said, "Oh, I got involved in the business or started a clothing brand." It was nice to walk there, and then so many people were introducing me to their children or their grandchildren because it was multi-generational coming around. It was nice to see. It was nice, but it was also, I'm always working too when I'm just thinking on how to tweak things, how we can make this show a little better, trying to get feedback constantly. You need to get feedback. I like to be in the middle of the show because you get the flow of the energy of the flow, which allows you to kind of tweak it going forward or tweak it even by the next day.
What did you, if you can tell us, like, was there anything that you saw that you're like, okay, I want to do this next year? That first year, was there something that you were like, okay, let me see what I can do?
Well, it was a little bit of a change because, they do a lot of festivals, Insomniac, and like each festival has to be treated differently. So they had multi-levels of passes and wristbands and security checkpoints. And I'm like, we don't need that at Warped Tour. We really don't. The backstage area, we know how to self-monitor our scene of music. It's very respectful. The fans respect the bands. They didn't have to worry about fans going in the dressing rooms or anything like that. It is a family. And the coolest thing for me was walking back, and a lot of the bands came up to me and were like, they were really happy to be back. The nicest thing I heard that whole weekend was a band came up to me and said, "You know what, Kevin, we all go play festivals. That's part of our economic plan now, is to play festivals. But coming to Warped Tour was coming home." And you kind of felt that whole weekend. I let everyone on stage to watch from the sides of the stages. Now, unfortunately, a lot of our bands have become pyromaniacs and have fireworks now. I don't know where that all came from because I had to ban fireworks on Warped Tour because it was getting dangerous backstage. Oh, yeah. But when they couldn't, they hadn't done a festival, I don't think, where everyone hangs out on the sides of the stages. That's part of it. The bands want their friends, their families standing around, and even like a day to remember, kind of built that big arch over the stage where they wanted everyone to hang out. Yeah. So and then it took a show or two, and it's really kind of eased into it where I feel the operations, because I'm looking at the size of the loading dock and I'm looking at labor calls, because to keep the ticket price affordable, we have to analyze everything and try to make efficiency. So year 2 is all about the efficiencies of the show.
That's great. I mean, I think that being able to adjust that stuff in real time is part of what makes it interesting puzzle to put together, I'm sure, for every year that you do this.
Yeah, I was on the road the whole time because I could deal with problems, and I made some mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You got to make decisions all day long, compartmentalize those decisions, and figure it out. But when you had 800 people on the road, it was constantly decision making, but I was there. So an agent in L.A. and a manager in Chicago, when there was an issue, they couldn't really, because I was right there. And most of the artists, to a point, not almost all of them up until the last year or so, if they had a problem, just walk over to my bus. Come over to bus 1, we'll figure it out.
And boss bus.
Wow, it was either the detention center, or it wasn't meant to be that. But I started out touring with my peers. They were my peers, and later on it just became I was either a mentor or a disciplinarian. It was a really different relationship in some ways.
It felt, when you were talking about the community aspect of all the bands, one of the things that really stuck out to me, the culture of it, was the barbecues that you guys still do. But how did that idea or concept come about? Having like a barbecues out backstage with all the bands.
Well, I was on Lollapalooza, and it was very structured. It was like vendors did not come backstage. Everyone's a few sponsored. It was very delineated. And when Warped Tour started, I kind of said, well, no, we need to have those sponsors who are going to support this and support this ticket price feel like they're part of our community. And a community to me used to be on a day off, one of those rare days off. It was a backyard barbecue. A little ramp where you would put a plywood and you'd have a band playing. And I was like, there was a band, Lagwagon, who was a punk rock band, and they had a cook that went with them, and he had his own little barbecue, but you had to have a special pass to get food from him. And I said, that's not Warped. We are all that. And I felt, how do you break this down after so many people are working so hard every day to make the show happen. So that's where we said, let's start the barbecue backstage. And of course, I was always trying to think of how to get things to help keep the cost down. So PBR was our sponsor, and I had them give me a barbecue that looked like a PBR can. And that's where it kind of got designed, where there was a band that was the barbecue band. And the barbecue band had to stay, and that band worked hard. They got their 30-minute set, they got a little bit of money, but they had to go to Costco or wherever to get all the barbecue supplies, come and barbecue for all the other bands, pack it up at the end of the night because they had to make sure the coals were out. We might have started a few wildfires across the country if they didn't, but and then we would roll on. But it was always about, who do you work for? Oh, I work for Smart Punk, or I work for Vans, or work, and it broke down those barriers. And that was it, because there was not. I really felt that it embraced those brands, and it took a while because this was punk rock where it was fuck corporate America. I was trying to figure out how to blend this together to keep that ticket price and that tour on the road. And even when Vans got involved, there was bands that would have Airwalk on their drums and stuff. There was a little bit of but then they started embracing it. And Steve Van Doren was very, very smart with that, because I couldn't let him put a band on us. At that point, there was no sponsorship on the stages. And he designed those first socks. I think he was the first one that invented the socks with the name Vans on them, because we were all wearing those big skater shorts and everything. And he just started passing out socks to everyone. And everyone needed socks. You gave them underwear, you would have never seen it, so it didn't matter. But he gave everyone socks, and people would be up on the monitor with their feet, and all the photos started having shoes, and it just kind of ingrained. And then all of a sudden, one time I looked up on stage, and the band MXPX had pinned up a little Vans in the corner. We've all kind of grown into understanding that these brands, if they're used properly, they are important to have. They keep your ticket price fair. They can also support it. And even this partnership with Insomniac, sometimes I get brands brought to me, and a few I've said I don't think it'll work. But last year, they came to me a few weeks before Orlando and said, Geico wants to be your sponsor. And I'm like, fuck, I live in a town that just burned down. No one's talking very kindly about insurance companies, but they do have a fucking cool lizard. So, so my first comment was like, can they bring someone in the lizard costume? And once we
on
had
a vert ramp.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, lizard costume. But I was also starting to pay attention, because this was right when our administration was going to take SNAP benefits away from the populace, and this was in this fall. We were playing Orlando in November, and I said, well, we do a canned food drive. We've been doing it forever. We give it to the food banks, and we were charging guests. So if you come as a guest to Warped Tour, you are going to be asked for a $20 donation that goes to the local food bank that offsets, and we give them the money. And I said, well, what about if Geico matched those funds? Match those industry guest list funds. So we agreed on that, and it was great because people were actually going, can I give $50 or $100? So it made them look a little bit better. Then they threw another thing at me about 2 weeks out. They said, we want to do a drone show. And I'm like, wow, drone show, Warped Tour? This is getting weird, but, this is the first time we're playing in the dark anyhow. And we actually worked it out where it worked out really cool, because we ended up with the Warp logo coming up, and then it was the lizard skateboarding with two cans in their hand. It looked like Budweiser cans, but they were cans. And then it was put them in a box like you're donating food. Then it said Geico supports the nonprofit, and it was really cool, the drone show. But then it is Insomniac, and everyone knows. Do you think fireworks at anything? Have you ever been to a EDC show? It's fucking bananas.
Yeah,
and
a little bit. Yeah.
And they look at me and they go, you know what, Kevin? We have a few fireworks left over from EDC last week. Do you mind if we shoot them up when the drone show goes up? I'm like, at this point, I've lost all credibility. So what the hell? Yeah. And it wasn't like 4 fireworks. This was like 4th of July. Hudson River, the whole place lighting up. Yeah, Warp people were like, "Oh my God!" But it's figuring out how to work with those brands to integrate them into what you're doing. And it actually came off super fun.
I mean, who would have guessed that a Geico lizard and some fireworks would end in fun? That's awesome.
We are about mascots, right? We have our mascot. We are actually, everyone needs a good mascot, and we're rolling out Mosh Pit Pete.
What? This is
Yeah,
breaking
so
news right here. I did
we
not
will
know
have
about
we
this.
will have an official mascot at Warped Tour. I mean, the Mighty Ducks sent a Wild Wing came down, and he
Yeah.
was supposed to only be there like an hour or two, and he was there like 8 hours a day. And he was backstage dancing around to the Agro Lights and Rise Against. I don't know. And you know what? That's the thing about Warped Tour. It's people hopefully leaving their community a little better. The nonprofit world went crazy last year with Warped. In D.C., we opened doors and everyone ran the balloon, but normally you'd think that at a festival they run to the stage. They made a right turn and filled up that nonprofit area. And people signed up, hundreds of people to register to vote, hundreds of people for Keep Her Breast. I'm not sure. Hearts of Maya, I don't know if she made it tonight, but she's one of my students. Her nonprofit's going to be there. So we're bringing in new nonprofits that we want to make to write Love on Our Arms. We're actually doing an online screening on Wednesday night of their documentary because they became a national presence on Warped Tour. We'll be doing that Wednesday night. So it's nice to see that, 90% of the people just want to come have fun and run around in the sun. But 10% of those people want to engage longer term.
Yeah, totally. And it's the heart behind it, I think, that keeps it going. You guys have all that. You have the bands, the multi-generational thing, the action sports, but it really is kind of the heart and soul of it is help, keeping the community.
Should we take some questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about
It's
that
about time.
Yeah. So I will try my best to see you all. Shoot your hand up high. Dead center.
Hi, Jen.
It's our first time caller. How was it going to a multi-day? Because my understanding, never having gone, before was always one day. How was it rolling it over multi-days and staying in like one place and not packing it up every night?
I built the show for myself. Like, got to keep moving. Don't think about it. It's a load in. We load in. It's 4 or 5 days setup now. It worked out fine. Doing the 2-day ticket. We sell a 2-day ticket. It seemed like everyone, the older crowd had sorer feet. They were super tired after 2 days. I think there's a point of life where we all, even myself, like festivals become very physical. It's physical going to a festival. And I think a lot of people came back to Warp, kind of maybe recapture that moment, maybe when they were, but the site was like 4 times bigger. It was massive, or 5 times bigger.
That was the thing that impressed me about it.
So I think we might have lost some people came back, enjoyed that moment. But 2 days might have been a lot for a lot of people. They came a little later the second day.
Another question. Anybody? All right, on the end there.
Wait, what's your name?
My name's Shiloh. I'm a concert photographer. I'm 23 years old. I just started doing this. My question for you is, what do you look for in like a photographer if you're like looking for people to shoot for the show?
Well, have you registered? Are you? What? Well, I think you can still register online. Look at the Warp website. Do you have some work in some different things? Yeah, we figured out they do make you have an insurance policy now to be able to go. I think a lot of festivals and things are requiring a policy, but they're very cheap. But you can look online, and if you're like published and things like that, there's probably a good chance you can get in. Thank you.
Nice. Far in the back corner there with the glasses.
Cameron, I'm a tattooer, and something that I noticed, I went to a Warped Tour last year, and I noticed everybody was heavily tattooed, and it's kind of part of the culture. With skateboarding, I grew up skateboarding, and it's part of tattoo culture. I feel like it all kind of goes together. And my question is, have you ever thought about incorporating some kind of booth or like tattoo event at Warped Tour?
And this is my personal thing. Like, and it's please don't take offense to this. I think sometimes people get caught up in the emotions. I think a tattoo should be thought about. Like, this is a lifelong commitment. I've seen too many people that spur of the moment get a tattoo and wake up with like a fleur-de-lis from New Orleans from a bad night or something, or that impulse tattoo. So I was more about things like mohawks or mullets. Like, we had a haircutting thing at Warped Tour. You can get a mohawk or a mullet. So we gave like 400 mohawks and 3 mullets. But, so if you get home with that and your parents are pissed off or something, or you have regret, what's the worst? You go bald for a little while you figure it out. So I've always believed, and that's my own thing. It's just tattoos should be really thoughtful and thought that person's thing. I had too many people around me that just got impulse tattoos. I had one guy who someone said, he goes, man, I hate Coke. I love Pepsi. And they go, okay, I'll pay for your tattoo. And literally he got a tattoo that moment with the Pepsi logo on him. I'm like, fuck, and he didn't even have a sponsorship deal on it. It would have been better. So that's just a personal choice, And we also, with Warped, when we were moving down the road, I tried to discourage people to get them all on the road. It was a very dirty environment. We were always dirty. We didn't even have to wear backstage passes because the venues knew who we were. We were sunburned. We had some random band shirt on that we'd worn for 3 days, and you didn't even get asked for your pass. And I actually had a few people get tattoos, the crew people, and end up in the hospital with really bad infections. So that's just a personal thing. Not opposed. I worked with an organization to promote piercings and tattoos in the workplace because when I started out, sponsors would send out people in golf shirts. And I no offense if anyone's wearing a golf shirt, but I said I tell my students never trust a person in a golf shirt unless you're asking where the first tee or the 19th hole is, And go to a venue and ask anyone in a golf shirt. I can guarantee you that they don't know when they tell you they don't have an answer. So it was just so they would send these people out, and I would go, wow, how are my fans who are tattooed and pierced and live a lifestyle going to trust buying a PlayStation 1 from, their dad? And it's so I said, why don't we hire? These people are smart. People with green hair, that's creative, that's art. So I helped integrate into corporate America some of the representatives that go out and work with these brands because that was an entry point to the music business. I tell people all the time. So we got a lot of people working on that. I also back then said, don't tattoo your neck or your face, But I've been around now for a long time, and it's I go in one time, and I was working with Homeland Security, and these guys rolled up their sleeves, and they were hardcore punk guys. They all knew me from the hardcore scene, but they realized they never wanted to go past a certain point so they could get that career. Now you can have a tattoo wherever you want, and you're okay. Look at it, it's cool.
I got a giant Elmo back piece that,
Yeah.
I got a work. No, I didn't get a work.
I figure as I'm getting older, I'll just say have return to my address on my face somewhere,
I think we have time for a few more. Man, you guys both raise your hand.
My name is Devin. I'm a guitarist in a band, and I saw the recent lineups for the Warped Tour. There's a ton of bands and a lot that are not very well known, and I was just wondering how you do recruiting for those bands and how you
They're really good. I mean, you don't have to be known to be on Warped Tour. You just have to be really good, and you have to have a good lineup, a good live show. We do our Ernie Ball out of the bands. We brought that back now. We used to do that in every city, and 6 to 8 young bands. Are you a new band or been around? Almost a year old. God, you're veterans. We're a band. No, just but we do our Ernie Ball Battle of the Bands again. It is trying to find those bands that are those bands that it's hard to break out now. But we listen to music all the time. Amanda, who works with me, we're constantly texting and sending things we see. Just hey, check this out, check this out. It's also economically tricky to book Warped because we just can't add zeros to book bands to keep the price, to keep that ticket price right. So I'm really happy to say there's bands that our economic model doesn't fit other people's economic model sometimes, and it's very simple. I'm proud because I used to pay those bands $250 a show, and now they're maybe making $1.5 million a show. But it won't fit into what we're trying to do ticket price. So having a Warped Tour with 6 to 8 stages does open that door for that young band that really might not be known, but we feel maybe through the history of doing this for 46 years and Amanda and her background that they deserve a chance. And because we all deserve a chance if you work hard.
Definitely.
What's your name of your band? So, 2-seater Jeep. Okay. All right. My email's kevinwarped@AOL. Oh, no, Kevin. No, it's not. My first email was kevinwarped@AOL because that's how bad.
AOL.
But that made you OG.
Yes.
AOL account forever was you were OG. Yeah. One more.
Well, we got work now for a band and a photographer. I think you're just like giving out jobs left and right. I love it.
There's a guy in the back there.
Okay. You see what you're talking about?
One more.
Hi, my name's Eric. Given the new partnership with Insomniac, do you think we'll ever go back to the run of the tour that had maybe 35 to 60?
No.
Ending on a quick one.
No.
Nice. I
No.
like it.
For multiple reasons. The sheer economics of moving that tour down the road, the stages and the generators and the food and everything else would be impossible at this point to do with the economic ways it is. And you look at this body. I've had 7 surgeries. I can barely. I insist at being every show, but I don't. And I said it at the end, and I didn't mean it, but I really believe that probably Warped was the last touring festival of that size. The world's changed. The economic models of the music business have changed. That it probably won't allow us to be able to do one again. I don't know if anyone else will be able to. But this was fun. It's always nice to
Totally.
see you.
Always.
And what's the name of your book?
Tearing Down the Orange Curtain. OC Punk Book on Instagram. And thank you so much, Kevin, for being here. Give it a huge round of applause to this man. And thank you all. And stick around. We got more. We got music coming up, so please stick around.